We must recognize that the Internet has provided a dangerous avenue to radicalize disturbed minds and perform demented acts. We must shine light on the dark recesses of the Internet and stop mass murders before they start. The Internet, likewise, is used for human trafficking, illegal drug distribution, and so many other heinous crimes. The perils of the Internet and social media cannot be ignored, and they will not be ignored.
That was President Trump on the dangers of the Internet and social media following two mass shootings that left at least 31 dead over the weekend. Minutes before the shooting in El Paso, Texas, the suspect posted his racist anti-immigrant manifesto to the online message board 8chan. Suspects in other mass shootings have also used the platform to post content related to the attacks. Now, Cloudflare, 8chan's network provider, has announced it's dropping the site as a customer, but the platform has already found another provider. CBS News' Chief Justice and Homeland Security correspondent Jeff Begays has more.
2 victims from gunshot wounds.
Many recent shootings share a troubling connection. The accused killers have left a blueprint for their alleged actions on social media, like the attack in a Pittsburgh synagogue last year in which 11 people were killed, and the massacre in Christchurch, New Zealand, in which 51 were killed. Nate Snyder is a former counterterrorism official in the Department of Homeland Security.
You have would-be recruiters and provokers who are using these platforms to get to people on a personal level.
The posts are out in the open, but difficult for law enforcement to spot unless they get a tip before an attack happens. Inside this conference room in an unmarked building, the FBI has been working to prevent future attacks. Analysts comb through dozens of recent active shooting cases. Agent Andre Simmons says they have been looking for patterns.
It's not really accurate to say that someone just snapped.
Not at all. In fact, what we found is that all of the shooters in our study certainly planned and prepared. Many shooters spent almost 2 years.
2 years.
Planning their attack.
FBI studies have found that only 25% of active shooters had ever been diagnosed with mental illness, and that shooters aren't typically loners. 27% had significant online interaction.
He has a heightened interest in weapons and explosives.
The FBI tells us they receive 3 to 4 referrals a week of people who've landed on law enforcement's radar. But in the majority of cases, people who see the signs of trouble before mass shootings often don't call police.
And the motivating factors, are they the same or different? They vary.
Usually it's a desire for some omnipotent control, even if it's just momentary. And there's also a degree of a desire for infamy and notoriety.
In a rare statement from the FBI, the agency said the attack in El Paso, quote, underscores the continued threat posed by domestic violent extremists and perpetrators of hate crimes. The author, April Glaser, now joins us from San Francisco with more on this. April, thank you for being here. How was 8chan started, and how did it become a platform that attracts these mass shooters?
Sure. So 8chan started in 2013. It's an offshoot of a similar platform called 4chan, which is an online message board where people post particularly offensive things. Racist memes, neo-Nazi propaganda, and it's really become a place where people have created a community around that. And one of the reasons why people have been able to create a community on 8chan around hate is because 8chan does not have any sort of community moderation policies. So, Facebook and Twitter and more mainstream social networks do have policies that ban the use of hate speech and organizing on those platforms around hate. 8chan was specifically created as a place that would not have that kind of moderation. And as a result, it has become a real cesspool for hate. And not just a cesspool for hate, but also a place where these communities have been able to organize harassment campaigns, as well as share the personal information of their enemies, for instance, people's addresses, credit card numbers, and more recently, as we saw in the Christchurch shooting from New Zealand, that shooter posted his manifesto on 8chan prior to committing the horrendous act of terror that he did And then after that, that playbook was copied by the Poway shooter before he shot a synagogue in Southern California. And then again this Saturday in El Paso, we saw the shooter post his manifesto with instructions to spread his rationale, to spread his white supremacy, his white supremacy from 8chan, letting them know he was going to be committing this grave act of violence. So it's become not only a meeting place, but also a place where we see a strategy of dissemination and the promotion of the violence that these individuals enact.
And it's interesting to hear you say that 8chan has almost no policies on the content that it can be posting. How has it been able to operate that way?
Well, there are not really laws that govern what a platform can and cannot allow on the platform. In fact, internet platforms are specifically shielded from liability in the United States about what their users post. So if you post something that is violent or racist to, say, Facebook is not going to be sued for that. So because there is this lack of liability, these platforms have been able to really have whatever policies they want. Now, in the case of Cloudflare, when we don't see the moderation happening on the platform level, that responsibility is moving up the stack. So this infrastructure service company, which is Cloudflare, that provides security against cyber attacks, decided that they are no longer going to be doing business with a company or with a website like 8chan that has become a safe haven and a breeding ground for hate.
Interesting. You also report that many people come to 8chan from the video game community. Why do you think that is?
Well, we do see people who enjoy violent video games wanting a place to discuss their gaming culture. Maybe they go to the chat app Discord, where video gamers like to congregate. And, they want to talk about the video games that they enjoy and perhaps in a non-politically correct way and in a particularly offensive way. And they enjoy that. And from that kind of conversation where people have created community around discussing gaming culture, where they're making off-color jokes and trying to be as offensive as possible, we've seen that kind of become an on-ramp for making jokes, say, about the Holocaust. And once we see these communities able to laugh at something like genocide, that becomes an on-ramp to laughing at other things. And it becomes less about being politically incorrect just for the fun of it, which is a ridiculous concept, but this is what's happening in these spaces. And the lines start to blur, and we see that these actually become communities of indoctrination. And so one of the strategies in 8chan is to find people who enjoy politically incorrect humor. They actually take them to the politically correct board, the poll board on 8chan, where they discuss these things, where they share the ideology, and it's starting to actually become a pathway to indoctrination into white supremacy.
April, you mentioned just a little bit a moment ago, but I want to circle back around. The New York Times reports that the creator of 8chan wants to shut that site down. Even if that were to happen, wouldn't these people find other forums to go and do that?
Sure. So, he has advocated for the site to be shut down. This is the creator of 8chan. And as you mentioned at the top of the show, just because Cloudflare decided it wasn't going to do business with it, 8chan was able to find another company that was willing to do business with it. And that's the same company that has provided security support for the Daily Stormer, another neo-Nazi website. That's the site where the Unite the Right rally was organized. But that doesn't mean that this deplatforming, this deciding that a company isn't going to be doing business with a website like 8chan, doesn't matter. Just because they're able to find another place to go doesn't mean that it doesn't matter. And that's because the internet is actually a pretty concentrated place. When it comes to creating a website, you need a domain registrar, you need a security service, you need cloud hosting, and there are only a few kind of big companies or main big companies that do this. And once all those companies decide they're not going to do business with you, like what happened with the Daily Stormer after the Unite the Right rally, it became harder for that website to be online. And it actually went into the dark web for a while and was harder to access. When these sites are harder to access, they're harder for people who are looking for this white supremacist messaging and these communities to find each other. And so this deplatforming, this not providing space for these communities to continue actually is effective in limiting their reach.
All right, April Glazer, thank you so much.
Thank you.